Workplace Induction. Workplace Practices and OHS Forward. The purpose of this workplace induction is to provide employees and other persons working for this company with an outline of our requirements and to promote the establishment of a safe and healthy workplace for all. Our goal is to provide a safe and healthy work environment, minimise the environmental impact of our activities and operations, promote equality of opportunity, and to provide a quality service to our customers. To achieve this, we must strive to establish a high level of safety and control on all projects, which can only be achieved with understanding and cooperation from all. This induction provides not only for the control of the physical working environment and work methods, but also for consultation and discussion between the company, its customers, associates and employees. This induction must be read in conjunction with the requirements of all relevant acts, regulations and enterprise agreements, and everyone working in company workplaces or sites is obliged to comply with them. In the event of any injury, it is your responsibility to cooperate in a rehabilitation program when recommended as part of a recovery program. If you have difficulty in understanding any of the content of this induction, please seek further advice from your supervisor. Introduction. This induction has been given to you for two purposes. 1. To tell you what you may expect from us as an employer, and 2. To tell you what our expectations are of you as an employee of our company. We have taken your understanding of the health and safety rules applicable to your workplace, and we have included an assessment of training in the induction which asks a number of simple questions on issues that you should know. This is not an examination, but a way of ensuring that you are aware of the rules that you must follow. Your responsibilities. It is a requirement that all personnel take personal responsibility for the safety of their subordinates, workmates, the public and themselves, work safely at all times, abide by workplace safety rules and regulations, actively participate in and support all OHS and injury management and rehabilitation programs, and promptly investigate, correct and report all unsafe conditions and acts. All persons are required to observe safety requests from supervisors and safety officers, comply with all safe working practices and procedures, immediately eliminate, if practical, or alternatively report to your supervisor any potential workplace hazards, mishaps, incidents or injuries that occur during the course of work, refrain from any unsafe or illegal practice, and ensure that you do not place yourselves or any other person at risk. Explanation of terms used in this induction. Must means that you are obliged to do what is referred to. Failure to do so constitutes a breach of your legal obligations as an employee and will result in disciplinary action. Must not means that you are obliged to not do something. Carrying out a prohibited action or activity constitutes a breach of your legal obligations as an employee and will result in disciplinary action. Should refers to a preferred course of action. Failure to do this will not necessarily incur disciplinary action, but may result in a breach of statutory obligations, especially if the failure results in an injury to yourself or another person, or in loss or damage to company property. Should not refers to an activity or behaviour which is not a preferred course of action. Carrying out non-preferred action may not necessarily result in disciplinary action, but may result in a breach of statutory obligations. Contractors and subcontractors are responsible for ensuring that the provision contained within this induction are observed when carrying out work for this company. All personnel are to be provided with a safe working environment throughout the term of the project, appropriate instruction and training, and personal protective equipment. Contractors and subcontractors must also ensure that all plant and equipment supplied to or used on a company workplace or site is safe, is appropriately serviced and maintained, complies with legislative requirements, and is provided with appropriate tagging, certification, logbooks, and instruction for use. Company values. As a company organisation, we hold the following values, which are reflected in our company policies and in our internal procedures provided for your information in this induction. Occupational health and safety. We recognise that it is a fundamental human right to be able to work and earn a living without facing the prospect of being injured or subjected to unnecessary risk to your health and safety, and we will make every effort to ensure that this right is enjoyed by all persons involved in our operations. We will comply with occupational health and safety laws and ask that you also take all practicable steps to ensure your own safety while at work and to ensure that no action or inaction by you while at work causes you to harm any other persons. You must use the safety and protective equipment or clothing provided for you. You must ensure that you know our health and safety rules and procedures and ensure that safety procedures are followed at all times. You must not misuse any equipment, plant or process that is provided to ensure workplace health and safety. You will be disciplined under company policy if you do not comply with the rules and procedures. You may also be at risk of fines if a workplace inspector finds you committing a breach of health and safety laws. Equal opportunity. This company aims to maintain a fair workplace for all employees. All individuals and groups will be treated with equal respect and dignity. Any distinction, exclusion, or preference which has the effect of nullifying or impairing equality of opportunity, or treatment in employment or occupation, or any other distinction, exclusion, or preference that has the effect of nullifying or impairing equality of opportunity, or treatment in employment or occupation, constitutes an offence under the Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Commission Act. Environment. We take a proactive approach to environmental management, seeking to act ahead of legislative requirements and conforming to all relevant environmental regulations. The principles of ecologically sustainable development are taken into account in all of our operations as we seek to conserve and enhance the community's resources, both now and in the future. Quality. This company is committed to striving for excellence in everything that it does, including the provision of quality service to our customers. In order to make this possible, we have implemented management systems which promote continuous improvement and provide assurance that we are fulfilling our commitments to provision of a quality service. Company policies and procedures. Absenteeism. Absenteeism is the situation where you are not at work and may take the form of late arrival for work or early finishing, taking extended lunch breaks, temporary absence from work for personal or other reasons, or failure to come to work altogether. If we consider that your absences are becoming frequent or follow a pattern, we will discuss the situation with you to determine the cause of the problem. If there is a valid reason for your absences, we will offer you assistance as part of our standard discipline process. If after this your absences continue, other courses of action will be considered. Alcohol and drug use. Substance abuse exposes everyone to the risk of injury and can lead to the damage of property and equipment. Impairment caused by the misuse of alcohol, use of illegal drugs, or the abuse of prescription medications are practices that will not be tolerated as they pose an unnecessary risk to the user and other persons. You should inform your supervisor if taking or failing to take medication is likely to affect your safety or the safety of others at the workplace. Instances of willful abuse or trafficking of substances that are illegal and or detrimental to the safe conduct of work are prohibited and are grounds for immediate termination of employment and removal from the workplace or site of all persons involved. Any activity of this type will be fully documented and attached to your personal file. Health and safety legislation places an obligation on us as employers to ensure that workers do not place their own health and safety and the health and safety of others in the workplace at risk. To fulfill this obligation, it may be necessary to remove you from the workplace when there is a belief that the health and safety of yourself or other persons is being compromised. Company property. 1. Care of company property. You must take all reasonable care in using our property. Employees are to ensure that any property of the company entrusted to them as part of their work is properly cared for and protected from loss or damage as much as practicable. This will include locking sheds, vehicles, toolboxes, etc. when a site is unattended, and protecting susceptible items and material from loss or damage due to weather or climate. Any loss or damage must be reported to your supervisor immediately, and, if theft, vandalism, or malicious damage to property is involved, to the nearest police station. On termination of your employment, or upon request, you must return in good condition, subject to fair wear and tear, any property in your possession belonging to us. 2. Damage to company property. Normal wear and tear of plant, machinery and equipment is an accepted part of business. This can be minimised by regular maintenance and adherence to correct operating instructions, and by not using for other purposes. Pre-start checks must be carried out to ensure that an item is ready and safe for use before it is operated. Where damage occurs to an item for any reason, use of the item should be ceased if it is safe to do so, or if continued use would create a risk to persons or property. All damage must be reported together with details of how the damage occurred. If damage occurs as a result of an accident, an incident report must be completed, and the accident reported to the relevant statutory authority, if applicable. Damage to company property due to negligence will result in counselling and disciplinary action. Malicious, willful or deliberate damage to or theft of company property may result in dismissal. Employee behaviour. 1. Fighting and violence. Conflict between co-workers is a natural part of working life. The escalation of conflict into aggression, fighting or violence is not condoned, and persons involved in fighting or violence risk immediate dismissal, whether or not they are the perpetrator. If you feel that you are being threatened with or being coerced into any type of violence, you should report the matter to your superior immediately to allow action to be taken to prevent the matter escalating into actual violence and the ensuing likelihood of dismissal. 2. Harassment. Harassment is any form of unwanted behaviour that may intimidate, humiliate or offend any person. Harassment of any person on the following grounds is illegal: age, disability, including intellectual, physical or psychiatric, and whether actual or perceived, and either present or past, marital status, race, colour, nationality or ethnicity, sex, sexuality or pregnancy. It is also illegal to harass a person on any of these grounds being applied to their relatives, friends or colleagues. The following behaviours may be classed as harassment: material that is racist, sexist, sexually explicit, homophobic, etc. Verbal abuse or comments that denigrate or stereotype persons. Gestures that are sexually or racially offensive. Ignoring, isolating or segregating a person or group because of their sex, race, etc. Sexual and common assault, also are criminal offences. Initiation ceremonies involving unwelcome sexual, sexist or racist behaviour, and jokes based on gender, race, marital status, sexuality, disability or age. We will take any reported cases of harassment seriously and take immediate action to investigate and deal with the issue. Both sides of the case will be listened to and, if verified, acted on to prevent further harassment. A person who lodges a complaint will not be victimised because of the complaint. If you are deemed to have harassed another person, you will be counselled, and if the harassment is continued, subjected to our disciplinary procedures. 3. Unacceptable behaviour and language. All employees have a right to work in conditions that they find conducive and comfortable. Aggressive, loud, lewd, obnoxious and offensive behaviours and language may be considered inappropriate in workplaces where there is a mix of age groups, cultures and genders. The following behaviour is unacceptable and may result in dismissal or removal from the workplace or site: assaulting, threatening or interfering with other employees or persons, or fighting or initiating a fight. Interfering with, willful abuse, damage or destruction of property, or removing property without permission. Interfering with, bypassing or rendering inoperative controls or equipment. Failing to adhere to safe work procedures and practices. Horseplay and practical jokes, and the display of offensive material, literature, magazines, posters, graffiti, slogans, etc. Employees are expected to adhere to accepted community standards of behaviour and language in the workplace. Language and behaviour which could be considered offensive by any other person will be grounds for counselling, and continued inappropriate behaviour or language will result in disciplinary actions being commenced against offenders. Employee rights. 1. Discrimination. It is the intention of this company to achieve the principal object of anti-discrimination, which is to respect and value the diversity of the workforce by helping to prevent and eliminate discrimination on the basis of race, colour, sex, sexual preference, age, physical or mental disability, marital status, family responsibilities, pregnancy, religion, political opinion, national extraction or social origin. 2. Grievances, conflicts and disputes. Grievances occur when persons feel that they have been unfairly treated in a matter between themselves and a person in a position of authority. Conflict occurs as a result of disagreement between individuals or groups, or individuals and groups, and may more often be of a social nature rather than an industrial nature. Disputes occur more due to a difference in interpretation and generally require the intervention of a third party to arbitrate on the matter. Disputes generally grow out of grievances or conflicts. Where you are in dispute with another employee or your superior, the matter is to be discussed between you, the other employees, and your superior. If the dispute is not resolved at this level, the matter will be referred to the next superior person until all avenues available in this process are exhausted. Where the matter cannot be resolved in-house, then it may be referred to an external tribunal for decision. 3. Workplace bullying. Differences of opinion, conflicts, personality clashes, and problems in working relationships are a part of working life. However, if this type of behaviour is repeated or increases in intensity and becomes offensive, humiliating, or threatening to a person, then workplace bullying exists, and as a health and safety risk, must be stopped. A single incident of harassing type behaviour is not considered to be workplace bullying. If you feel that you are being bullied or witness another person being bullied, you should report the matter to allow proper action to be taken to prevent the situation from escalating. Personal appearance and hygiene. We expect that all employees will adhere to accepted public standards of hygiene, bodily and clothing, and failure to adhere to these standards will result in the offender not being allowed to start work until they have met these standards to the satisfaction of their supervisor and company management. Persons working public interface areas are expected to maintain a suitable standard of body cleanliness at all times. Return to work and rehabilitation. Rehabilitation is a program designed specifically for a person who has suffered a work-related injury or illness to enable the person to return to normal work as soon as possible. In the event of injury or illness, it is your responsibility to cooperate in a rehabilitation program when this is recommended as part of the recovery process. The program may include alternative or modified duties as part of the rehabilitation process. Your cooperation may also be required to assist in a rehabilitation program developed for a fellow worker who is recovering from an injury or illness. Time cards, sheets, etc. You must clock on or off or fill in timesheets personally. Disciplinary action will be taken against any employee clocking on or off for another employee, as well as the employee being clocked on or off. You must clock on when starting work and clock off when ceasing work for the day. You must also clock off when leaving the workplace for private purposes, and clock on when you arrive back to recommence work. This will not be necessary for any absence during meal breaks, etc., which does not extend beyond the break. Workplace procedures. First aid facilities. First aid facilities are provided for the welfare of persons in the workplace or on site who may sustain a non-disabling injury, and to provide initial treatment for an injured person before transfer to a medical facility. Unless otherwise advised, the first aid facility is not intended as an ongoing treatment facility. All injuries, no matter how minor, must be reported and treated to prevent deterioration of the wound through infection, and to facilitate the healing process. You should familiarise yourself with the location of the first aid facilities and the identity of first aid attendants or officers. First aid facilities must not be used for any purpose other than for which they are provided. All first aid injuries and treatments must be entered into the first aid register. Hands must be washed before administering first aid or handling first aid equipment. Advise your supervisor if any first aid stocks are getting low to allow replacement before they run out. Hazard reporting. A hazard is anything which can cause injury, loss or damage to a person, property or the environment. If you detect something which is hazardous, you should remove or rectify the problem if it can be done immediately. Report the hazard, verbally and using the hazard report form, to the person in control of the area. Prevent others from coming into contact with the hazard, barricade sign, etc. Avoid placing yourself at risk of injury or illness through contact with the hazard. Incident reporting. An incident is an accident where no person was injured, but may have been, and where damage did or may have occurred to plant, machinery, equipment, materials, property, or the environment. All incidents must be reported to your supervisor immediately, both verbally and by the incident report form, giving all details as required on the form. Injury illness reporting. All work-related injuries and illnesses must be reported as soon as possible after the injury or onset of the illness. The injury report form must be completed in full and be submitted together with a doctor's certificate from the doctor or practitioner providing the treatment. A clearance form from your treating practitioner stating that you are fit for duty must be obtained and submitted before you can recommence work after a work-related injury or illness. Safe work procedures. You must follow safe work procedures provided when using plant, machinery and equipment. These procedures are designed to protect you from hazards which may be encountered during the use of the plant, machinery or equipment, and failure to observe the procedures may expose you to an unacceptable risk of injury or illness. When a safe work procedure specifies the use of protective clothing or equipment, this must be used when carrying out the procedure. Safe work procedures will be found either at the location where the item is used or the task is carried out, or they will be located within the company safety records. Ask your supervisor for these records. Safety and warning signs. Safety signs are provided in workplaces to warn of hazards and to advise of actions which must be carried out or are prohibited. You must obey the message or instruction given on the sign. Persons found defacing or damaging safety or warning signs will be subject to disciplinary action. Site safety rules. Building and construction sites contain many hazards not found in other workplaces, and by their very nature can pose serious injury risk to persons entering the site. Site safety rules are to be communicated to all persons entering the working areas of a site and should be displayed in a conspicuous area. Site safety rules must be followed at all times, and the principal contractor may remove persons who fail to comply from the site. Emergency procedures. Provision for emergencies. A building owner must provide for the safety of occupants of the building in case of fire or other emergencies. Items such as fire extinguishers, hose reels, exit doors and escape routes are provided for your safety and must be kept in good operating condition and must be readily accessible at all times. Fire extinguishers should be placed on a holder attached to a wall and not stood on the floor or be placed on a shelf or in a rack or in a cupboard, etc. Provision for emergencies. Firefighting appliance and emergency exits must not be misused or used for purposes other than for which they have been provided. Any use of a fire extinguisher must be reported immediately to allow for the unit to be recharged and ready for use should a need arise. If a fire extinguisher is used, no matter how little, it must not be placed back in position, but be serviced immediately. Misuse of equipment provided for emergencies is not allowed and is an offence under fire safety laws. Exit doors and passageways must be kept clear at all times and be kept clean. Doorways must not be obstructed even for a short period, and flammable materials or dangerous goods must not be stored or placed in the vicinity of an emergency exit. Emergency procedures have been developed to cover different types of emergency situations which may occur while you're at work. You should learn what to do so that if an emergency arises, you are able to follow the procedure for that type of emergency. You should also know who the persons responsible in overseeing controls of emergencies are in your workplace. In a small workplace, everyone should be aware of what to do in any emergency which may occur. Do not attempt to use a fire extinguisher or hose reel to fight a fire unless you have been trained in the use of the appliance. Use of the wrong extinguisher could result in injury or death if, for example, a water type of appliance was used on a flammable liquid fire or a fire involving electrical equipment. You must follow instructions when evacuating the premises for any reason. All employees are required to meet at and remain at the designated emergency assembly area until the all clear is given or you are told to do otherwise. This is to ensure that all persons on the premises are accounted for and to allow further instructions to be given. Emergency procedures provide information on the actions to be taken in cases of emergencies. You should know what to do before the emergency happens to prevent any panic or confusion. Training drills must be taken seriously as these will need to be followed should a real emergency happen. Additional procedures or instructions may be necessary in some workplaces and you must also be aware of these. Specific workplace issues. Cranes and hoists. You must not sling or load or use a crane or hoist unless you have been instructed in the precautions to be followed and the safe use of cranes or hoists. Loads over 1 tonne in weight and complex loads should only be slung by a qualified dogman or rigger. A certificate of competency as a crane operator is required to operate cranes with more than 3 powered operations or operated from a cabin mounted on the crane. A load must not be moved over any person when using a crane or hoist to move the load. Forklifts. You must not operate a forklift in a workplace unless you hold the appropriate National Certificate of Competency or equivalent state certificate or licence. Note, this provision does not apply to a person carrying out servicing, maintenance or repair work on a forklift, except where they are using a forklift to move a load as part of a servicing, maintenance or repair operation. A person must never be lifted on a forklift with anything other than an approved lifting cage. The cage must be secured to the tines, the cage gate must be securely latched, and occupants must wear an approved safety harness which must be secured to the cage at all times. Avoid jerking or rocking the cage, which must be lowered before moving the forklift. Hazardous materials. Strict safety rules apply when using hazardous substances and dangerous goods. All safety data should be available at the place where substances are used, and protective clothing and equipment recommendations followed to prevent exposure to the substance. Always ensure that your protective clothing and equipment is serviceable and fits properly. A current material safety data sheet must be available before a substance is used, and the prior approval for the use of a substance may be required. All precautions and safety requirements set out in the MSDS must be adhered to, and advice regarding the use of the substance should be sought from your supervisor if you are unsure of any aspect relating to the use of the substance. You must not use a substance for any purpose other than that for which it has been obtained. Never substitute a substance for another unless you have been specifically instructed to do so. Private use of substances used in a workplace is prohibited. Always follow instruction for cleanup and disposal of waste or spilt material. Ladders. Strict rules apply to the use of ladders in workplaces. The correct style of ladder should be chosen for the type of work to be carried out, with the use of extension ladders and step ladders restricted to access or single-handed tasks only. Platform ladders should be used for work such as accessing stock and for work of longer duration, e.g. painting, fitting of electrical fixtures, etc. Trestle ladders are only to be used for support of planks and should not be used for access purposes. The following guidelines and rules are to be followed when using ladders. Industrial ladders only are to be used in a workplace. Domestic ladders must not be used. Always inspect ladders for damage or distortion before use. Do not use if faulty. Timber ladders must not be painted. Up to 300 mm on foot may be painted for identification. Have broken or splintered stiles, or have loose, broken or missing rungs. Ladders used for access should extend at least 1 metre above level being accessed and be secured against movement. Always place single and extension ladders at an angle of 1 in 4 and ensure that both feet are secure set and cannot slip. Do not carry anything in hands when climbing or descending ladders. Use bucket to raise or lower tools, etc. Never use a metal ladder in the vicinity of electrical installations or for electrical work. Ensure that footwear and ladder rungs are free of mud, oil and grease. Always face ladder and maintain 3 points of contact when climbing or descending a ladder. Lifting equipment. Lifting equipment must only be used for moving loads and must be used in the manner for which it was designed. You should not use lifting equipment for purposes other than lifting loads, and the equipment must be used in the correct manner. Never expose any lifting equipment to heat unless it is specifically designed and provided for that use. General safety rules for the use of lifting equipment. Inspect slings before use. If in doubt, have them checked by a competent person before using. Inspect shackles, hooks, rings, etc. for distortion, wear, damage or cracks. Ensure that chain blocks are operating smoothly. Tight spots generally indicate worn or distorted parts and should not be used. Lockout and tag-out procedures. Lockouts are designed to prevent injury to persons when working on machinery by preventing the machine being started or operated. Only devices that incorporate a lock or can accommodate one or more padlocks are suitable lockout devices. Except in cases of emergency, when the person who placed the lock is unable to, a lockout should only be removed by the person who placed it. A tag is not an effective isolation device and acts only as a means of providing information to other persons in the workplace. A lock should be used in preference to a tag as an isolation device. Personal danger tags, red on white, are used to inform that an item of plant or machinery is in an unsafe condition and that operation of the machine may endanger the person who placed the tag. Out-of-service tags, black on yellow, are used to prevent the use of an item where it could cause injury due to a fault. Out-of-service tags must not be relied upon to provide personal protection. Machine guarding. Accidents involving machinery are one of the most common injury causes, and severe injuries and fatalities occur through contact of persons with moving parts of machinery. Safety rules to be followed when working near moving parts of machinery and plant include: do not wear loose clothing or jewellery and contain long hair, beards, etc. Do not wear gloves when using rotating machinery or around moving machine parts. Do not operate machinery without guards fitted. Do not remove guards unless you have been authorised to do so, and only do so when machine is off. Wear eye protection at all times and use hearing protection in noisy conditions. Keep clear of moving machinery and machine parts. Guards are designed to protect persons from moving parts and must always be in place when the machine is in operation. The following guidelines are to be observed. No item of plant or machinery is to be operated unless all guards are correctly fitted, in good condition, secured in place and operating correctly. Guards are only to be removed by authorised personnel after the machine has been stopped and locked out. Guards must be refitted before machinery is restarted. All workers must follow safe work procedures when operating plant or machinery. Movement of loads. Injuries resulting from overexertion are generally permanent or cumulative in nature and may result in permanent physical disability and an inability to work or even carry out normal everyday duties without pain and difficulty. You must always follow the safety rules when moving loads or exerting force and effort. Size up the task and check the weight of a load. If it feels too heavy, get assistance. Do not move loads unnecessarily. Avoid double moving of objects if possible. Use mechanical aids, trolleys, etc. to move heavy loads or to move loads over longer distances. Always observe correct manual handling and safe lifting practices. The rules to follow for safe lifting are: plan the lift. Ensure that you have good access to the object and your travel path is clear. Make sure the load is safe to move. No loose or moving parts, container in sound condition, etc. Get close to the load you want to move. Get a good grip. Use gloves when handling rough, sharp, hot or cold objects. Keep back straight. Bend knees to access job and use legs, not back, to lift the load. Keep the load close to your body when lifting and carrying. Obtain assistance with long, heavy or awkward loads or when moving over a long distance. Plant and machinery. You must be authorised to operate plant, machinery or equipment and must have received appropriate instruction and training necessary before doing so. Where it is necessary, you must hold the appropriate certificate or licence to operate the plant, machinery or equipment. Items of high-risk plant and machinery must be inspected and maintained in accordance with statutory requirements and manufacturer's instructions. Mobile plant should be checked and controls tested before use, and attachments and equipment must be visually inspected to detect any damage before use. Details of inspections and tests of plant and machinery must be entered into a logbook, with details of the test including the date and time of the inspection, the results of the inspection, and the name of the person who carried out the inspection. Any faults must be entered into the logbook and reported to the person in charge of the machinery or the job on which it is being used. Unserviceable tools and equipment must be tagged and returned to the issuing tool store or the supervisor of the work area. Regular cleaning should be carried out to allow easy visual inspection for worn and broken parts, oil leaks, loose or missing fasteners and damage. Removal of excess oil and grease reduces wear by not allowing abrasive particles to adhere to moving parts. Restricted operations. Specific categories of work and occupations require the person carrying out the work to hold an appropriate qualification, certificate, licence, etc. Examples of these occupations include rigger, scaffolder, dogman, crane operator, electrician, fitter, welder, shot firer, etc. No worker is to carry out such work or work outside of his or her recognised area of expertise or skills without proper authorisation. No person is to enter designated no-go areas without authorisation, and barricading and signage must be respected. Scaffolding. All scaffolds where a person may fall 4 metres or more must only be erected by a competent scaffolder. All scaffolds must be erected in compliance with relevant regulations, codes and standards, and in accordance with manufacturers' or suppliers' instructions. Scaffolding must be erected on a firm base. Damaged components must not be used and should be removed from the site or workplace. Kickboards and guardrails must be placed on all working platforms. Never mix components from different types of scaffolds or substitute components. Safe means of access is to be provided to all working platforms, and climbing on the outside of a scaffold is prohibited. Mobile scaffolding must not be moved if any person is on the scaffold, and wheel locks must be actuated before entry is made to the scaffold. Scaffolding, including footings, should be regularly checked by a competent person to ensure that it is safe for use. Solar radiation. You must protect yourself from solar UV radiation when working outdoors. Clothing such as long sleeves and trousers will provide good levels of protection, depending on the actual protection level provided by the clothing, and hats will provide protection from direct, but not reflected, sunlight. Broad-spectrum sunscreen must always be used on all exposed skin areas. Sunscreen must be reapplied every 2 hours or as specified by the manufacturer. Sunscreen may need to be reapplied more often if it is washed off by perspiration or wiped off during the work process. Tools and equipment. Tools and equipment must only be used for the purpose for which they were provided and be protected from damage or loss. Wear and tear due to correct use is inevitable, and tools should be correctly maintained and sharpened. Handles should be kept free from damage and splinters and not be allowed to become loose. Unserviceable tools must not be used, but returned to store for repairs or replacement. General safety rules apply to the use of hand tools. Use tools only for their intended purpose and do not exceed design limits for the tool. Keep tools sharp and remove burrs and mushroom heads. Ensure that handles are not loose or damaged and inspect bearing, matting and striking surfaces for cracks and wear. Always wear eye protection when using hand tools for striking, chipping, etc. You must not use power tools unless they have been tested by a qualified person and an inspection tag showing the due date of the next inspection has been fitted to the plug end of the lead of the tool. Visually inspect all power tools, flexible leads, safety switches and power boards before each use for any signs of physical damage, e.g. cracked or broken casing, missing bolts or screws, etc., or malfunctioning switches. Do not use faulty or damaged equipment, but place an out-of-service tag on the unit and take it out of service until it has been repaired by a competent person. You must not use a power tool for any purpose other than that for which it was provided. You must not overload a power tool, but use it only within its design limits and according to the manufacturer's instructions. Private use of power tools is not permitted unless permission to do so has been granted. Workplace housekeeping and hygiene. Many workplace accidents and incidents occur because of poor housekeeping in workplaces. You should keep your workplace in a clean and tidy condition as much as possible to avoid time wasted in trying to locate items, to provide a workplace free of hazards, and to maintain a satisfactory work environment. Floors should be kept clear and items which could fall placed in secure locations. Paperwork should be filed or stored in such a way that an item can be located easily if, for any reason, you are not able to be at work. Rubbish must not be allowed to accumulate, but should be placed in bins and bins emptied on a regular basis. Putrescible waste, food scraps, etc. must not be placed in workstation bins, but instead be placed in special bins provided for this purpose. Recyclable materials should not be disposed of as general waste, but be placed into special bins provided for recyclable materials. Recycling bins should be used correctly, with only the type of material for which they are provided placed into them. Waste chemicals, oil, paints and clearing materials, etc. must be disposed of as hazardous waste and not be placed into general waste bins. Worksite security. You must take all practicable steps to ensure that company property is protected from theft, malicious damage or unauthorised use when property is left unattended for any period. The degree of security warranted will depend on the circumstances. A site left wholly unattended will necessitate a greater degree of security than one left unattended during work periods when there are persons working within sight distance. Protective clothing and PPE. Protective clothing and equipment must be worn wherever there is a risk of exposure to hazards in the workplace. Protective equipment requirements are listed on Safe Work Procedures, and these recommendations should be followed as a minimum requirement. Protective equipment must be properly cared for and maintained to ensure that the equipment is ready for use when needed and will function correctly and protect the user when worn. Protective clothing and equipment is generally issued on a personal basis and should not be used by another person unless steps to ensure the hygiene of the clothing or equipment have been taken. Clothing. High visibility clothing. For added safety in traffic situations, many items of clothing are available in high visibility colours for road workers and persons working in close proximity to industrial machinery and vehicles, e.g. safety vests, shirts, jackets, overalls, etc. Reflective strips are fitted to many items for persons who may be required to work at night or in poor light conditions. You must always wear clothing of this type when traffic is a risk to your safety. Head protection. Safety helmets and caps are constructed with an ABS plastic or polycarbonate head shell with an impact-absorbing adjustable harness for personal fitting. They offer protection to the head from falling objects, impact with a fixed solid object, contact with live electrical wires and parts, exposure to ignition sources and intense heat, and are available in a range of colours. Accessories such as earmuffs and face shields can be attached to safety caps. Head protection is mandatory on construction sites, mining operations, and many heavy engineering and fabrication workplaces. Areas in place of work where a risk of head injury exists should be declared as a head protection area and be clearly identified by use of appropriate safety signs. Any person entering a head protection area must wear appropriate head protection. Eye and face protection. Eye injuries are one of the most common types of injury in industry and one of the most avoidable. A wide range of eye protection is available and can provide excellent protection from injury due to flying objects, dusts, chemicals, glare and solar radiation. Safety spectacles can be obtained with prescription lenses where they are required to be worn for long periods. Side shields or wraparound styles offer better protection from side impact particles. Working areas where a high risk or ongoing risks of eye injury exist will be declared an eye protection area, and any person entering the area must wear appropriate eye protection. Hearing protection. Noise-induced hearing loss generally occurs over a long period, with persons at risk often unaware that their hearing is deteriorating. Industrial hearing loss may result in a shift in the hearing threshold, a lessened ability to hear different noise frequencies, a diminished hearing capacity, or conditions such as tinnitus, ringing in the ears. All of these conditions are irreversible. Hearing loss can occur over a long period or may be caused by an exposure to a single or repeated loud noise event, such as an explosion or hammering noise, impact noise. Persons who work or are present in areas where there is a risk of exposure to potentially damaging noise levels must wear appropriate hearing protection at all times that they may be exposed to noise. Hearing protectors may be either disposable, e.g. earplugs, or non-disposable, earmuffs or reusable inserts. Reusable protectors must be used only by the person they are issued, unless they have been effectively cleaned and sterilised before reissue. Hearing protectors must be cleaned and maintained in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions and stored in a clean location. Do not use damaged or defective items, but replace them immediately. Respiratory protection. Respiratory protective devices, respirators and face masks are designed to protect the wearer against contaminants in particulate form, fumes, dusts and mists, and contaminants in gaseous form, such as gases and vapours. Air purifying devices are not suitable for atmospheres which may be deficient in oxygen. Always ensure that the respiratory protection that you are using is the correct choice for the task. If you are in any doubt, ask. Respiratory protectors, with the exception of single-use dust masks, must be cleaned after use and stored in a clean, dust-proof container or storage. Respiratory protection is not to be shared with other persons unless it has been thoroughly cleaned and disinfected before reuse. Hand protection. Suitable hand protection is available for persons who may be exposed to a risk of hand injury at work. Different types of hand protection are designed to protect against a particular hazard or types of hazard, and you must be careful to select the right glove for the task you are carrying out, especially when handling and using chemicals. All gloves, single-use latex types excepted, are to be properly cared for when not in use. Gloves which are worn, torn or damaged must be replaced immediately. Gloves must not be worn when they will pose a risk of injury in certain situations. Gloves must not be worn when working on or with rotating machinery or moving parts, due to the risk of a glove becoming caught in the moving parts and dragging the hand into the machine. Footwear and foot protection. Footwear must be suitable for the type of workplace that you are working in. Enclosed footwear is a minimum requirement in most workplaces, with a need for protective footwear in areas where a high risk of foot injury may be present. Fashion footwear may be unsuitable in most workplaces, and guidelines for footwear to be worn with corporate clothing and uniforms should be followed. Protective footwear is designed to protect the feet from falling objects, hot materials, and penetration injuries, and must be worn wherever there is a risk of injury to the feet from hazards in the workplace. The type of footwear that you wear in a workplace should be selected taking into account the types of hazards that exist there. Where a risk of foot injury exists in wet areas, waterproof footwear which has safety features, such as toe caps and midsoles, should be worn instead of normal safety footwear, which could be damaged by the wet conditions. You are to properly care for your footwear according to the care instructions provided by the manufacturer. A proprietary dressing should be applied regularly to leather uppers to prevent the leather drying out, and footwear allowed to dry after working in wet conditions. Footwear which is worn, damaged, or otherwise unserviceable should be replaced. Induction complete. Please complete the questions below.